is beginning to sort of shift my perception of reality
Mm-hmm.
around. And I just mention it because indeed we are in a some kind of entrapment, expressing thoughts that the system cannot digest well on platforms they have trapped us in.
Mm-hmm.
So as we express these thoughts on Instagram, we are more susceptible to their control. Is
Mm-hmm.
that is that is that absurd reality eliminated with us leaving their platforms and being on another one, Substack? Have we really eliminated? Have we escaped?
But no, what we're doing. Sorry, I'm just trying to get some people across who are on the other side
Mm-hmm.
on Instagram, yeah,
Mm-hmm.
and yeah. Walaikum salam, people. So we're on Substack today. So if you please just go over to Substack, and follow us at uh, Dystopia en Masse. Okay, okay, all right. So I think I the thing is, I think you have to really step back and get some context of what's really going on in the United
Okay.
States.
All right. So
Um, no, if you no, don't, please, if you go onto Instagram with me,
there will be
right?
an echo. Hold on. Give me a second.
Exactly.
Just let me fix this real quick.
Yeah.
Sa-
You can turn your volume completely off. That's more
It's
important.
off. Exactly. I
Yeah.
fixed
Good.
it.
Okay.
And
Good. All right. So we just need to message people and just tell them to come over here. Yeah. Um. Okay. So what we've got in the United States is that you've got three broad regions with who have historically had very different socioeconomic conditions. Okay. You got the American East Coast, and its center of gravity is New York. It's New York, Washington, Boston. That's its right. Its center of gravity. Washington being quite separate of the center, right? But it's closer to New York. Then you got the West Coast, which is the Pacific Seaboard, and that has very different socioeconomic conditions. People got there very late. I mean, until uh, until the late 19th century, early 20th, um, it wasn't very clear whether that would fall under the Tsar or the United States. I mean, literally like that, right? Um, so you've got all of this stuff going on, and then you get the Midwest, which comes from the arrival of mass European migration, especially from Germany, Scandinavia, some France, right? But the French migrations come a bit later. Okay, and this Midwestern area. So then you got the American South, but that more or less has fallen under a lot of that has fallen under the splitting between the East and and what we would call the Midwest, right? And the the Eastern Seaboard is the seat of financial power. Okay, so Wall Street's on the Eastern Seaboard, etc. So that's the seat of the financial power, um, and it interfaces very strongly with Washington. Okay, and then on the other side, on the Western Seaboard, is the seat of microchip-based computing innovation and media. Right, there's some activity of media on the Eastern Seaboard, but then the Midwest is agriculture. Um, is mainly agriculture, uh, mining, manufacture, internal logistics. So now these three groups are very, very different. Okay, and so what we see is that their dynamics. Um, so so they have different oligarchs. Okay, so they got different oligarchic groups, and what we're seeing is the Midwest, which has been denied it, that kind of central role, is now beginning to push itself into the center. And to do that, it's weaponizing fractal identities, but it's also building a broad coalition with all of these different all of these different outsider groups. Okay, this
Mm-hmm.
includes somebody like Elon Musk.
Yes.
So and they are weaponizing fractal identities because they are making, MAGA is about weaponizing fractal identities. Yeah.
MAGA is about weaponizing fractal identities.
Okay.
Pardon
All
me?
right. Okay. Thank you.
What is happening?
Yeah. Okay, we'll do that. Yeah. We're being asked. No, that's difficult if we're online. On that's not, sorry, technical. If we can't accept it while we're in a live. Yeah. But you can do it. You can do it on my iPad.
Let
Yeah.
me
Sorry, we're trying to
see.
get people over to this end. Thank you. We got 13. Yeah. Um. So does that give it some context for you?
It is absolutely important that people hear this because, in trying to make sense of what is happening now, I think people have to simply take a little bit a step away. We talked about this last week off air, that
Mm-hmm.
people have to take a step away from text as it is spoken by the protagonists. And we're talking
Mm-hmm.
about the White House here. The
Mm-hmm.
bully pulpit will be used in ways that will ultimately be deceiving.
Yes.
The bully pulpit will be used in ways that will be distracting, deceiving, that will be,
Mm-hmm.
um, I'm looking for the right word here. Uh, Distracting and deceiving do the job. But essentially, the distinction between the text that is spoken, the pretext that is created, the context that is obscured, the subtext that is intended,
Mm-hmm.
these these layers of communication will be obscured by the text that is presented in what Trump says.
Yeah.
And
Yeah. And then what the media says.
in what the media says.
Yeah.
The superficiality of the text will act as a flare, as a set of flares, and
Mm-hmm.
distract people's attention from the architecture,
Mm-hmm.
underlying architecture that you've just laid out.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
we cannot afford more years of this.
Well, I mean, because of the way that the system is designed, right, and that so in the foreground there is always going to be the part of fractal identities is the class war.
Come again,
Part of
please, Bill.
fractal identities is the class war,
The classwork.
right? So the class war is part of like fractal identities. So
Mm-hmm.
the creation of a working class, the emergence of a middle class, and the destruction of an aristocracy, and then the and then the emergence of a technocratic group, and then the industrial science-based leaders of industry and society. All of that is part of the redesign of society during the Industrial Revolution, right? And it implicit in it is the use of fractal identities. So one of the things, because this article that I just did, what's the name of it again?
Who's
Martin.
dying? Who's doing the dying?
No, the one before. This one this week. This week was
Hold on,
and
I have it right here.
it's the name of this. Sorry, I'm tired.
I can
Martin
imagine.
deities.
Yes.
Yeah,
Hold
what's the
on.
title? Give me the title again.
Hold on. My bosses are here. Just
Sorry, there are a lot of moving parts today, so you have
let
to
me
excuse
pull it
me.
up. Let me pull it up. So, for everyone who's joined, I'm live on Instagram. If you want to follow Dystopia Unmasked, please, I want to invite you to go to Substack Dystopia Unmasked, where the podcast has moved to, and will be going live every Wednesday over there.
Yeah.
So,
So
this is just sort of me opening this channel to invite you to go to Substack and look for Dystopia Unmasked, where we are live right now. And thank you
so
so much.
the name is Death Worlds and Market Deities, right? It's the title of the article.
Exactly. And now I have to pin this comment. I've pinned the comment, Khadija. People should be able to see it who come in here.
Good.
Yes, marketplace deities, exactly.
Yeah. So Death Worlds and Marketplace Deities, right? And so so I lost my thread, but it's it. It's difficult. We're on two platforms, moving people over, and
It's different.
yeah,
It's different. But
yeah,
I'm happy we're doing this, and I feel it's exciting to do this today.
yeah,
So I'm happy.
yeah. So we got Death Worlds and Marketplace Deities, and so what we're and in it I was talking about how the neoliberal movement is basically um it, it reads like a theological movement, right?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
It deifies the market. It it not only it deifies and places animist power in the market. So the market itself is a sentient being that that reorganizes society and can make decisions about what is best, right?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And so
Mm-hmm.
governments should leave it alone because it and let the market decide. Okay. And what has happened is that every time a doctrine like this has become very popular, it brings its benefits because it allows greed free reign. However, um, however, what you see is that the market doesn't have any sense. So it often you often end up basing upon short-term rationale, long-term basic structural problems in the economy, which either you have to go to war against an economy that has not taken such a stand and doesn't believe in your market doctrine, and so they build an economy which is much more robust and begin to um, displace you from the geopolitical movement, and then you either have to go to war or
Mm-hmm.
actual kinetic war, or you have to go to a trade war. And we're basically here again. We were there at World War One, right?
Yes.
And so now we're back there. And at the same time that this is going on, there's a war going on in the United States
Mm-hmm.
in which the Midwest oligarchy want their seat at the table. They feel that they've been treated. Um, they feel that they've been treated abominably. That they're not respected, and and um, and that the economy is being run by people with a global vision,
Mm-hmm.
and their businesses are the backbone of the United States, right? In terms of manufacture, in terms of digging things out of the ground, in terms of agriculture, in terms of logistics in the United States. And so
Yep.
what we're seeing is that that group now wants a seat at the table. They need a seat on the Fed. They've now got their man in the government, and if they're going to last, they have to they have to make some in this administration. They have to make some lasting changes, and not only that, but they have to encroach on that new on the global vision of the New York group. They have to be able to insert themselves as a power group in that in order to hold significant leverage to keep the New York group in line, right? So we're looking at a battle in the United States, okay?
For more complexity still, because I'm really excited about this mapping of actor
Mhm.
interest groups that you're doing. Insert the Western Seaboard vested interests for even more complexity. What happens then?
Well, the Western Seaboard interest have staked their interest on AI, okay? And they built Silicon Valley on the integrated circuit or the microchip. And they fear that they're going to lose their dominance.
Mm-hmm.
So they're in two groups. One is their group is well, how will we maintain our dominance? You have to
Yes.
recognize that part of what you're seeing in Ukraine is okay. I gotta step back a bit. Okay, so the United States put microchips in its weapon systems. So it's got
Yes.
more information and its bombs are smart. They can get to the target. So that really increases. I mean, when you're dropping bombs that are not smart, 80% of them go off target, right?
Yeah.
Um, and so okay, so okay, sorry. So the microchip is essential to U.S. dominance. And the reason, one of the there are two reasons why Ukraine has been able to stand up against the Russian meat grinder,
Mm-hmm.
right? One is
Mm-hmm.
that the Russians are attacking, so they have to gain ground over an entrenched, dug-in military. That's always difficult. But the Ukraine bombs are predominantly smart. Their ordinances are predominantly smart, and the Russians can't produce that level of microchips. They can't afford to do that. So their weapons are dumb. Okay, so there's this discrepancy between how many Ukrainians die and how many Russians die. Okay, so they need it is in the interest of the Pentagon because of the deep state, which is the unifying factor in the American system, which is the military and the deep state. Okay, and and so they need so the West Coast of Silicon Valley needs to maintain their dominance in the microchip industry, and they need that in order to to try and maintain their lead on AI. Now, the mhm,
An important question. Just a few um, weeks ago, just a few weeks ago, time is flying by so fast, it feels like it was days ago. Trump comes out, 2 weeks ago, Trump comes out and says there's going to be Stargate. If I'm not mistaken, he was talking about 500 billion US dollars worth of investment into the Silicon Valley types of schemes, talking about the Stargate project, talking about fast pacing um, artificial intelligence technology in different domains, in different sectors, in the economy, in the finance, in the cultures, of course, also, but not the least in the military domain. And so the different applications of AI were supposed to be funded and fueled with 500 billion US dollars, whereupon a few days later, the Chinese came in with DeepSeek, um, um, AI technology, which, in a sense, contrary to what the Americans put on the market, calling it open AI, which
mhm,
wasn't open at all,
mhm,
but which was proprietarily protected and against what was it, paywalled, let's say,
mhm, mhm,
just paywalled. They put DeepSeek on that wasn't paywalled and that has even an open um, not open source, but what's the word I'm looking for? A wiki kind of concept behind the programming. So individuals can download it on their cell phones and personalize it, which,
Mm-hmm.
when associated with the rumor the West has put out on the Chinese smartphones and technology. Remember when they did that to Huawei a few
Mm-hmm.
years back? The point was that Chinese products have backdoors which um, direct any and all personal interaction with their tools to some place in the Chinese Communist Party.
Mm-hmm.
I know what you're about. I no, I guess you're about to say how how is that different from what Snowden told us?
Yeah, how is that different? Yeah, how is that any different? Right?
So with that in mind, I was going to now ask you, is it naive or is it alarmist rather? Is it too alarmist of me to say if you take food out of a man's mouth, in this
Mm-hmm.
case, if China takes a $500 billion project out of Sam Altman's mouth, out of Elon Musk's mouth, out of
Mm-hmm.
the now Western seaboard people's mouths,
Mm-hmm.
isn't that preparing the ground not for an economic, not for a technological arms race, but for a kinetic confrontation?
Um, the United States is not in a
Military,
position to
kinetic
to have
military
a
confrontation.
military. They're not in a position to sustain a military. They can't sustain it. They do not have the. They do not at present. They do not have the manufacturing capacity. They haven't indicated to their military industrial complex clearly, and to ensure that that happens. Europe is not prepared for that. They are 3 to 7 years away from being able to do so.
Did you,
Okay.
for our audience, just for our audience, did you hear that? This is what you call a nugget of expertise. So you're telling us that within the next 4 to 7 years, there is the preparation. There may be drums of war, there may be a casus belli, but it will take time until it metastasizes into an all out explosion at the military level.
Yes, they're just not capable of doing that at present. Okay.
Mm-hmm,
So what we are going to so and and um and Russia is bogged down in Ukraine
mm-hmm,
I mean it's major, and they would need and either they need, if they want to pivot to China,
mm-hmm,
they can't keep the they need okay, so the American strategists need to keep Russia bogged down in Ukraine as the threat to keep the Europeans in NATO unified because they cannot defend themselves, right? They're unable to defend themselves.
This is
And so,
this is an extremely important point. An extremely important point, the importance of which cannot be overstated.
yeah,
And the complexity of which is, in my opinion, under scrutinized.
yes. And so the Europeans, as long as that threat is over their heads, they will have to sheepishly follow the United States, even if it is into hell itself, right?
This is the question. Is there, I mean, perhaps if we have a moment when you deem fit in this conversation, you can pick up on that, but I don't want to derail the conversation too much. Is there an inevitability? Is the inevitability with which Western Europe has attached itself, its fealty to U.S. dictates? Is it is it real? Is it necessary? Is it is it indeed necessary? And aren't there more profitable options for the EU members to go independent of the US? I guess what I'm saying is, what are the chances of a split in the global north between Eastern North and Western North, Eastern being US and Western being what we now know as the European Union? Is does the confrontation with Russia bear potential for split between Western and Eastern West?
Well, I
If
think
that makes sense.
you have to look at it in more global terms. You're talking about China,
Mm,
Russia,
mm,
access to Sahelian resources for Europe. Okay, so access to African resources for Europe. Yeah, um, and for the United States, their need to regionalize their supply chains. Okay, so Latin America is going. You heard Trump talking about Greenland. Well, that was a salvo.
mm.
They want they want direct access to the resources of Greenland.
Is
Um,
it, is it, did you also hear that as a declaration of war to the European Union?
no, it's a declaration of, you need to organize yourselves in ways that are beneficial to us, because we are the ones who are defending you. Okay, the Danes just entered NATO. They removed themselves from they removed themselves from neutrality,
Hmm.
right? Which is because the Baltic Sea, you have to
Yes.
pass through Denmark.
Hmm.
Okay,
The national conservatives in Denmark aren't happy with Trump's demands.
but well, I think Trump's demands is I don't think that the Americans will want to to take over Greenland. What they want are the resources of Greenland, right? It's closer to
Oh,
them, and they want
mm,
access to the resources.
mm.
This is a power. This is a play.
Text and
Yeah,
subtext. We had it at the
yeah,
beginning. The text and the subtext. Don't get
yeah,
distracted. Hmm.
yeah. Changing the relationship between the United States and Mexico, or bringing Mexico clearer into line, so that because at present the Chinese are producing are assembling in Mexico
Hmm.
and shipping to the United States as Mexican goods. Yeah. So
There's so much to
the
say. So please, I'm sorry. You have to finish your thought.
it's complicated.
And it's
It's not straightforward.
it's layered. And when you mention Mexico and Canada, I have questions there. Why is Trump approaching a subject that could have been approached from the point of view of regional integration from the angle of regional confrontation? Why isn't he interested in a supranational organization comparable to ASEAN, comparable to the European Union, comparable to the African Union, with Mexoscan, Mexico, US, and Canada?
Because the you have to understand, with the United States,
Hmm.
they became a power in the Second World War by
Hmm.
the outcome of the Second World War,
Hmm.
and by outmaneuvering the Soviets, so that the Soviets died the Soviets disproportionately paid the price for the defeat of the Nazis,
Hmm.
and the Americans had promised them loans as a result of that, and they didn't give that to Stalin. They reneged on the deal.
Hmm.
So um, they outmaneuvered the Soviets, and so they, in Lacanian terms, they are stuck in a symbolic world, in a symbolic order, which is still based around the Cold War, and they can't shift out. And so that's why they're losing the peace. They're losing the economic dynamics of the peace, because they're not doing strategy anymore. They're enacting a dream world. They're trying to enforce a dream world upon the world, in
Mm.
order that the world can um, can agree with this mirror image that they have of themselves.
Yes.
Okay,
Yes.
which is part of the problem, that happens
Hmm.
when the adversary of a great power like this collapses.
Hmm.
Okay, because
Yes.
it then believes that that its collapse or their defeat is based upon their inherent superiority. And so, having been trapped in that logic,
Yep.
then they think that the same logic, right, is going to continue to work. And so, like, so they get a bigger hammer and a bigger hammer, and they try to do that, but it doesn't work. I mean, this is one of the readings of what happened between the Romans and the Phoenicians, right? Um, uh, uh, and so, so this aspect of what's going on in the United States is that they're not reading the text and the subtext as the text. They're reading this text and the subtext as our text. So everything China does is centered on the United States. All of the analysis of the Europeans, etc., is centered on the United States. And let me give you an example.
Mm-hmm.
Um, in coltan, in Congo, which is
Mm-hmm.
completely a deaf world, the extraction of coltan, the Europeans don't want to extract the coltan directly because then they're going to face, they have legal restrictions. So they're picking it up to the Chinese. So although the price of coltan is cheaper, is cheap, the Chinese are digging out the coltan.
Mm-hmm.
They are they are storing it in China. They're selling, of course, to the United States because they have to the Europeans because they have the best processing, etc.
Yeah.
But they're also preparing themselves for a world that needs massive storage because the Chinese are serious about being carbon neutral. Okay, so what they're doing at present is, or what we think that they're doing is that they themselves are taking out the coltan while it's cheap because they know it's going to get expensive, and because they are a centralized economy, they can get the kinds of cheap bank loans, right, that allow them to do that.
This
So
is
all
now,
of
I
the
mean,
so hold on,
this is
all of the analysis of this, right, is termed in a war between the United States and the Chinese for the control of coltan, right? Which they miss that the major battery technologies that the Chinese use are not based on coltan, right?
mm-hmm. 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 Mm-hmm.
Especially for EVs, for electronic vehicles, etc., or electrical
Yes.
vehicles, etc. Right. So
Yes.
what we're seeing here is that the Americans are unable to read the text, right? It says, "Hello, how are you?" And they say, and they read, um, "Hello, I want to know what's going on with you because I intend to take that away from you."
Yes.
Yeah. So they can't see past the hegemon.
Yes. Yes.
Yeah.
So we've touched on a couple of things. We've gone just sort of, this is what my mind is doing as you speak.
Hmm.
You elaborated for us the different interest groups, actor groups. I wrote down we have an intra oligarchical competition
Yeah.
inside the US, an intra oligarchical competition. And I love the way you've laid it out. I hadn't heard it like this before. And the way you've laid it out makes it gives us tools for some prognosis of how Trump's presidency will go.
Hmm.
Because this intra oligarchical competition that is taking place in the empire, in the US empire, the dominant hegemon of this planet,
Hmm.
militarily so powerful, the nine following military mites of the planet would have to unite their military budgets to meet the military budget of the US.
Mm-hmm.
This particular hegemon, the most powerful human organization that humanity has ever produced in written recorded history, has within it fragmentation, has within it competition at the peak of the pyramid of hierarchy. And these different interest groups, we are told in the text, are but two, Democrats and Republican. But if we look at it sort of with a scanning eye, I've been accustomed now to seeing Wall Street, the security sector, the surveillance security sector, and um, then the political group, which is subdivided in Senate, Congress, and the executive branch. So
Mm-hmm.
these are the true sort of levers of power in that country. Um, did I mention Wall Street? I think I forgot to
You
mention
did.
Wall Street.
You did.
I
You
did.
mentioned Wall Street. Yeah.
Okay, so here we have what you
And then the Fed,
and
which
the
is an outpost of Wall Street.
exactly. So and now you bring in Silicon Valley, the new technocratic oligarchs,
Mm-hmm.
and we now understand there is competition in there. The empire is not a monolith.
No.
It's not monolithical. And my prognosis, I like playing the prognosis game. I don't always hit the nail on its head, but when I
Well, that's
do,
not. But that's not the point of prognosis, is it?
that's not the point of prognosis.
It's to have a working. Is to have a working theory in which you can. Yeah,
You can check, you can test
you
it,
can
right?
check, you can test and build out.
So now what we've done in this conversation is from the actor analysis in terms of who is in the empire vying for control over the empire's steps, next
Mm-hmm.
moves, we see that there's internal competition. One question is, how is that internal competition going to affect the viability, internal and external, of the US as a coherent actor? How is the competition going to affect the viability of the US
Mm-hmm.
internally, in terms of its viability and coherence, and
Mm-hmm.
externally? Is that a question you would like to touch on, or should we leave it as a question for
I
people to
think
think about?
it's something we should think about. I mean, and it's
Hmm.
something that I am looking at. I mean, basically, the how those global interests of the United States are understood
Hmm.
by those different groups, in as much as those coincide and overlap, then they will fight but remain true to something of the projection of US global power.
That's exogenous impact.
Yeah.
Okay.
So so the fact that okay, so let's take Trump's statements about Gaza.
Hmm.
Okay.
Hmm.
Now, the Gaza ceasefire was never meant to be a ceasefire for the sake of the people of Gaza. That was not. Don't get that out of your head.
Can I
Right. I
quote?
don't think
Can I
anybody
quote
has
from?
any.
Can I
Hmm.
quote from your article, Trump? The article this week on Dystopia Unmasked. It would be
Hmm.
my hope, you write, quoting Trump, that we could do something really nice, really good, where they wouldn't want to, where the, how can you even speak this? It's difficult for me to even, where they wouldn't want to return. Why would they want to return? The place has been hell. It's been the meanest, the toughest places on earth. It's been every picture from every angle better than if I were there, and nobody can live there. You cannot live there. So, this is Trump's sort of angle on the Gaza situation.
Okay. So again, you gotta get to your subtext, right?
Hmm.
Gaza has plays two important roles.
Hmm.
One, is that it has the largest amount of natural gas in the Leviathan um, field,
Mm-hmm.
natural gas field. And so the Israelis and the the British and the United States have already tied that down. So that is going to be shipped in. That's going to be shipped in to Europe. Yep, most
Yes.
likely by Greece,
Mm-hmm.
and
Mm.
Cyprus would like a part of it,
Yes.
right?
But we have the Chinese
Egypt
ports
also
then.
would. Egypt would also like to have. Well, these are it's the pipelines.
It's
It's
the
going to be it's
pipelines.
by pipelines, right? So
Mm-hmm.
Biden had wanted it to go via Egypt. The Egyptians want that. I also. So a lot of that is okay. Well, does it go through Cyprus's waters and Cyprus gets the money, or does it go via Egypt and then cross over to Greece, right,
Yes. Mm-hmm.
etc. That these are the questions. Okay.
Indeed.
Now the next one is that you need the canal, which another canal which connects the Red Sea to the Mediterranean, and that artery is central to ensuring that that international trade passes through that and can stand again and is big enough to stand against the emerging North Sea route, which the Russians trialed last year. Okay, so they need to get that big enough, fast enough to
Mm-hmm.
make sure that the the Mediterranean remains important. So they got buy-in from the Mediterranean states. On the southern coast of the Mediterranean, they're all um, Arab Muslim states.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, but now they're worried about their livelihoods. Then you've got the Gulf, etc. You've got the Gulf and the Red Sea. So you want Congo and its resources come out, and they have to pass through this through now only the Suez. So they want to put another one so that the Egyptians so that they break so they expand the capacity and they break the exclusive relationship with the Egyptians. Okay, so what we're looking at here is that Gaza sits on the exit point of that plan. Now the problem is that if Hamas or the Gazans remain there, then um, they the investment to develop that is going to have to come from governments because private interest is going to find it too risky.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Okay,
Absolutely. Absolutely.
so in order to do it with private capital, they have to ethnically cleanse
Mm-hmm.
Gaza.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so they've produced a death world to produce the argument that these people have to move because they can't live there. The Israelis cannot do the job, which they have proven. So the Americans are considering that this is so important to their strategic interest that they will
Yes.
come in and do the job themselves.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Okay.
An excellent analysis. Excellent analysis. To just to encourage you, perhaps to add some more elements. A question about Egypt now and about Jordan this week. Uh,
Mm-hmm.
in the text, they've projected into the public, presenting rebuttals to the US's requests. If past behavior is instructive,
Mm-hmm.
uh, they're going to cave in. If past, if there's any relevance to how the people in power, both in Jordan and Egypt, came into power, they will have to cave in. And I'm throwing in another variable for your scrutiny. The idea that is very seldomly mentioned, and I have to say I don't like mentioning it. But I'm a social scientist and I wasn't taught to think in fear. But the term here is Greater Israel. It includes 20 to 30% of Egypt. And we have people in power down there who are pursuing the maximalist design of that particular draft of what they want their state to be. That means if there is indeed the combination of that interest to expand and
Hmm.
include 20 to 30% of the Sinai, of that country, that's the Sinai, back into that maximalist design that is on the table, even though nobody
Okay.
talks about it.
Okay.
Plus,
Hmm.
yes, let me shut up here.
Okay. So that's on the table, okay? But they can't manage Gaza. They can't manage Lebanon, okay? And
The reason I say this, not to interrupt, just to
mhm,
accelerate, to heat up your point, the reason I say this is there is a deadline running right now until Saturday noon. Mr. Trump has declared that Thursday, Friday, Saturday, in 3 days, on the 15th, I think, if my math is correct, on the 15th at noon, he didn't specify GMT, CET. He said at noon on Saturday, all hell will break loose if Hamas does not deliver all hostages in one bulk, which I read this morning Hamas has said they won't do.
yes, and the reason, okay, so forget Trump,
Mm-hmm.
right? Trump is a cipher. Trump is not important.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Strategically, they need that land. Okay. They agreed to a ceasefire, two reasons: to get Hamas's leverage out of their hands, right? Two, to observe, um, because right now Gaza is the most scrutinized piece of real estate and calling it of land on the earth. So find out where the strategic centers for Hamas are. Right, that's it. So once they have that information and they have the hostages or enough, they don't care. They don't care. So this is necropolitics. They do not care about Palestinians. They don't care about Arabs.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Now the Jordanians depend on the Israelis for water. They are they are water insecure. Any attempts at independence in that have been bombed by the Israelis, and they have made attempts. Okay, they have no negotiating position. Their state will not survive without Western support. It's done. It was a
Mm-hmm.
Western creation. Um, the the Europeans sold them to the
Mm-hmm.
Israelis. They
Mm-hmm.
sold them to the Israelis.
Mm-hmm.
Regarding Egypt, um, Egypt cannot survive without Western support, but is attempting at some is attempting to negotiate some kind of some sense of independence by in their collaboration in their collaborations with the Chinese, right? The Chinese cannot militarily support them, so they will have to fall in line.
Egypt now.
Egypt, Jordan, they will
Yeah.
have to fall in line.
This is what I meant by if their track record is an indicator of things
Okay.
to come.
Yes, but I'm talking about it in terms of just real politics
Mm-hmm.
and not in terms of what we think is morally right.
Oh,
Right?
absolutely.
They do not have the leverage to go that one alone.
Can we even add something on in the case of Egypt? Not just
Mhm.
as you clearly indicate that they don't have the means, but also that Sisi's regime is pretty much a pale, watered down version of what Israel has been since 1967. Sisi's regime is a Pentagon afterthought. They created the Egypt we've seen since 2011,
Precisely.
kicking
Precisely.
Morsi out of the way.
Yep.
And
Yep.
so the idea even that the public statement that Egypt put out, I think in the last 48 hours, that uh, they will resist depopulating Gaza. And I mean, excuse me, but one of the most consistent and deeply felt shocks of my life as a political analyst was when I realized 20 years ago that there is absolutely no solidarity whatsoever in practice with Gaza from Jordan and from Egypt. Zero. There's blah, 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 blah. But in practice, in no economic sector, they closed the borders. They shut down the tunnels to Egypt where Gaza was getting, among other things, necessities and health means for their healthcare system from, under
Mm-hmm.
the statement that terrorism was being funded through that, or supplied through that. They shut down the connection that the Palestinian civil society had with their Egyptian brothers and sisters. When I read that and I understood, I was shocked. I thought this is what the world is about.
Okay.
Talk and act, different lanes, completely different lanes.
Yes. And so you have to really read the subtext. You really have to read the subtext. Okay. When a nation says, I'm not going to do that and I'm going to resist that,
Mm-hmm.
you have to, where the arms going to come from, right? Then you get a group like the Houthis
Mm-hmm.
or Ansar Allah
Mm-hmm.
in in Yemen, and then you get a group like Hezbollah in
Hold on,
Ecuador.
before we move into the east further, just one more question. How much is it? The 3 billion annual US dollars that Egypt gets. I understand Trump has threatened to dry that up if Egypt stays the course of not wanting to accept the Palestinians. And Egypt
The,
has said they are willing to rebuild. You know, Sisi's thing is rebuilding cities and rebuilding urbanization, urban sprawling, urban modern centers.
Mhm.
In that vein, they've said they've loud-mouthed that they will do that for Gaza, and Trump has clearly said you're not going to do any of that because if you do, the money we've been giving you will be dried up. Can you contextualize in the context of these kinds of verbal
Okay.
threats
Okay. So
what the realpolitik could
okay.
look like?
So basically, the the Americans need to control Gaza because the Israelis cannot handle it, right? That's basically what you're seeing. And it it if you look at it like a chess piece, this is Gaza will give them
We'll give them a
a
bishop.
bishop that
Oh,
they can move, so they can then move now the movement of goods, this central artery to the world, this most important artery to the world, which is the Red Sea to the Mediterranean. They now can, they have to hold that. And in the play for the of the Midwestern group against the rest, if they can secure that, they have leverage with the with that New York-based group or that Eastern Seaboard group that we were talking about. Okay, and they have to come and sit down to negotiate and give them a seat at the table on the Fed. Right. Without that, they do not they don't have. Um, Now the problem is here's the problem that all Hamas have to do is survive. If they defeat Hamas, and they ethnically cleanse the land, they will have they will have lost soft power like nobody's business, and everybody will be looking at them. And if they have an option other than them, they will take it. If they take it, they only take it through fear. That's if they
Mm-hmm.
can defeat them.
Mm-hmm.
So if they win, they lose, and if they lose, they lose.
Mm. These are This looks to me like a very, very realistic assessment, diagnostic assessment of what the world is ailing from in this moment of our time.
Well, that's
I
what I can
could
see now. I mean, it's a prognosis, right? I'm not saying I'm correct.
No, but it does sound sort of very, very accurate. And I would invite our audience here to read this week's article, which is a strong focus on the economy uh, and on the analysis of the economic principles and economic imaginary underpinning much of the movements of the
Hmm.
actors in this moment in time. I, there are some points you raised today that I would like to
Hmm.
uh, that I would like to return to a little bit. You
Hmm.
focused you just in intending a summary. So you mentioned that what is going on in the Congo right now plays a role, and I think that is such a rare focus. You tied together China, coltan, no, sorry, colombite and tantalite, which are then joined together to form coltan. You focused on China's role in there, and I was surprised to hear that in this clarity. And that is indeed something new because I was about to say, the situation in Eastern Congo has been going on almost unchanged since 2000, since 1997. Since 1997, when Mobutu was overthrown. And the structure of the interest groups has barely changed. At that time, I wrote an article in 2001, 2002, focused on the diamonds that Rwanda was exporting without having any diamond mines. And today, it was a leading exporter of diamonds to Belgium, but it doesn't have any diamond mines. And the region where it was being extracted from was from Goma. This is a very region that is being genocided right now by a group that is funded by uh, the Rwandan government. By the way, a statement which, when I was writing that article, I was informed be careful how you word things. You might land on the Rwandan Secret Service's list of observation. They're that virulent. If anyone's paid attention to those things, people in Canada get found dead in their bathtubs for speaking too harshly about the Rwandan government, or in the context of speaking too harshly about the Rwandan government. Maybe that is more safe
Yeah.
to a formulation.
Well,
And its operations in
okay.
Congo.
So Congo is an extension. Sorry, that would be a whole new thing, and it's led
It's a
nowhere.
whole new thing. But
Yeah, I don't want to go there.
well,
Yeah.
so maybe next week we might touch on that. But these are what you've done here is you've shown actor competition at the oligarchic level, at the heart of the empire, what one could call the center of the center. So, at the peak of the center of the center, there are competitive resource interests and vested interests competing. The periphery, the periphery of the center, um, and the periphery of the center has allies and competitors and vassals. We're talking of the European Union. We're talking of China and Russia, you mentioned. We didn't go too much into Iran and Iran's potentials this time, but we've spoken about if Hamas survives. The question is a big if. Can Hamas survive? Maybe let me ask that. Can Hamas survive?
Um, the reality, okay, so two things that the United States is no longer the center of the world. They've lost that. That's their problem. So a lot of what you're seeing is the generation of the psychodrama that keeps them at the center of our world. Okay, because they are no longer the center. So I think that's important for us to grasp. The next one is that the United States has not really won any of its major wars in it didn't win in Vietnam, it didn't win in Afghanistan,
It didn't win in Korea
and
before that.
it didn't win in it didn't win in and it didn't win in in Iraq.
Oh, yeah.
Okay,
And
so
we could even argue World War II wouldn't have ended the way we know it if the Russians hadn't defeated two-thirds of the Nazi army.
well, the Americans supplied the Russian. They were, the Russians fought a lot with American arms, right?
Mm-hmm.
So
Mm-hmm.
strategically,
Mm, mm,
um, and they came out on top.
mm-hmm.
The,
Mm-hmm.
the
Mm-hmm.
Russians did the dying; they came out on top.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Um, so what we have to understand is that the Hamas, they know this, and this contingency, they have proven that they are aware of the real politic of our world.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so I don't think that they are unprepared for this. Okay, so now what we will see is whether the United States can manage that, whether Thiel has his um has his
Palantir.
autonomous robots, Palantir has his they have to fight a very different war because um unless what they try and do is what they did in Fallujah. Okay, but what what you're seeing is that these guys are so far on the ground that that will only kill civilians.
Um, what you're mentioning here, just as a strange sign, an element of relief to
Hmm.
those listening too, Trump and his son-in-law expressing such greed and interest in developing that territory for profit as real estate people gives me one piece of relief that they won't use nukes on that territory. Otherwise, they destroy the market value of that place.
No, the market value of that place is a distraction.
Is it
Yes,
pure distraction?
it's pure distraction.
Well, in any case, using nukes
It's a
around
nice
there.
it's nice icing on the cake, but it's not the cake. Okay, all right. Because I would like to wind up because
Yes,
it's
please, please
after
go ahead.
yeah.
Please go
Um,
ahead.
look, on Dystopia Unmasked for this until the 27th of April, we are going to be looking at necropolitics. Okay, we're really focusing in on necropolitics. And if you want to suggest or discuss a potential contribution, then please just DM us or email us. Um, and our email is dystopia.unmasked@gmail.com. Okay, and the other thing is that towards the end of this year, we would like to do a publication. Okay, so we're working at that, and so get ready for that. But our theme for this period is called Necropolitics and the Ethics of Warfare and International Relations. So I think um, the Death Worlds and Market Deities article um, really gives us, you can see that it's completely in line with the necropolitics, and this discussion is a discussion about about necropolitics. Fractal identities is itself is essentially necropolitical. Yeah, I recommend people you should read Achille Mbembe's Necropolitics and the Post Colony. You'll find them very useful. Um, I always recommend Fanon, right? Foucault I like
Hmm.
particularly, um, and so on. And but also you must James Baldwin is also really useful, very insightful. And also you really have to shift the 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 discussions to areas of which are becoming much more important, because what the United States is now facing is the reality of its diminished importance in the world. If they can secure Gaza, then they extend it a little. If they can't, they don't. But what they have shown is that, and what's really interesting about the Midwest group is the Midwest group are the ones who were used to displace the American Indians or the indigenous people of the United States. Okay, and the largest amount of them came from Germany, right? The next group comes from Scandinavia and places like Ukraine.
Yes,
Um,
Toynbee. Toynbee has a book about this, about who populated where.
oh, I
Uh,
didn't know that.
I think I may be Albion's seed. I think it's Albion's seed.
Okay,
It's
all
it's
right. Well,
quite.
please, we can have a chat about that, and so I need to get hold of that. But yeah,
Mm-hmm.
I really need to get hold of that. But
Mm-hmm.
yeah, so you're looking at these groups who come from those places who were predominantly Protestant. Okay, they settled in those places. They didn't settle in the cities. As a result, they didn't develop things like strong mafias, etc., and those
Mm-hmm.
informal groups, like the
Mm-hmm.
Italians and the Irish did.
Mm-hmm.
Okay,
Mm-hmm.
so they their arrival at political power is late and often through the leverage of their churches.
Mm-hmm.
So it's a very different way of doing politics, and so the more kind of secular atheist East, E- um, Eastern Seaboard group or the New York group really didn't want to deal with them that much. They didn't consider them seriously. And so now they're making them move, and they're making them move with their outsiders, with relative outsiders who so it's a weird coalition. It's not a monolithic coalition itself in itself,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Fascinating.
So
Absolutely
the
fascinating point.
all right, yeah, I get it. It's now what 11:18, so it's now 20 past, so almost.
Thank you so much for doing that. Actor analysis, interest analysis, relational analysis between the different actors at play in here, laying out the different interests, the pathways, the prognostics of what could happen. We didn't do much therapy today, but we did diagnostics in a way I haven't picked up like this anywhere else. Complex
Mhm.
diagnostics, looking at European interests, looking at China's role in all of this, looking at the opening of the Northern Sea, the impact it has on the Ben Gurion Canal, its potential. and looking at the role of Congo connected to China in all of this. For more of this, every Wednesday, Dystopia Unmasked with Alexander Carberry, the mind behind these, and the article on Dystopia Unmasked. Please follow Dystopia Unmasked. Help us in our exodus from Meta, and let's get Dystopia Unmasked more popular than it is now.
Okay, guys, thank you.
Thank
It's a
you, thank you,
pleasure.
thank you,
So
thank you indeed.
I got a delivery to just on time.
This has been really good,
Yeah.
very
Okay.
instructive.
No, no, and thank you guys. It's been a pleasure. Okay.
Thanks indeed. Bye for now.
Bye bye.